Hi everyone, welcome back to On the Bench, the My Catholic Library blog, where you can see the traditional bookbinding work that I do, whether that's creating new books, restoring old ones, and sometimes even working on things that you can't really call a book. And what's on the bench today is certainly in that category. This is a tiny little prayer booklet, really, and something of a personal project. So this little booklet belonged to my mum's sister, my Great Aunty Ayleen, who died a number of years ago, and her son Adam has a milestone birthday coming up, and my mum thought it would be a nice idea to spruce this up a little bit and make a nice presentation of it and send it to him as part of his gift for his upcoming birthday. The book itself, booklet itself, is called Via Pacis Via Crucis, and it was written by Father William O'Grady in 1941, so this is a product of the Second World War. We open to the title page. We can see it was published by Laverty and Sons, who I'm sure we will come across numerous times over the course of this blog. They were very prolific publishers of liturgical and devotional books, especially for the laity, pocket missals, that kind of thing, all throughout, I think, the 1920s as early as the 30s and 40s certainly, and even I think into the 50s. So no doubt there will be other Laverty and Sons books on the bench at some point. And looking into the history of this, obviously it's 1941, the Blitz has happened, is happening. For the first time this kind of war has come to British shores. Very, very difficult time, obviously, for everyone. Via Pacis Via Crucis, the way of peace, the way of the cross. And Father O'Grady, I've looked into some of his history. There's not a whole lot of information about him online, but fortunately on the parish website, where he was the parish priest, obviously during the Second World War, there's a little page about him, and it turns out he was well known as an intellectual, but he was also a poet and even a cartoonist. And there's some really wonderful, quite self-effacing, self-deprecating cartoons on there. I think usually done for Christmas cards, that kind of thing. So I'll provide a link for that in the description and in the written blog post as well, so you can see for yourself the kind of thing that he did. It's quite nicely produced. It's only a small booklet, thin card cover, what you might describe as flimsy really, but the cover does have a very nice letterpressed title. It's been stamped in on an old letterpress machine, which means on the inside cover there's a texture you can feel the letters have been stamped into this, and it actually looks, judging from the title page, that it was all put together and then stamped, rather than having the cover stamped and then attached to the pages, because it's left little marks on the inside, stamped in even into the opening page, which isn't necessarily the way you would do it these days. I don't think you'd make the cover separately and make the pages separately and then put them together. But I guess, it's 1941, you've got to crank these things out. The only particular in this little volume that marks it out as having a personal history, separate from the publication, is the inscription, my Great Aunty Ayleen's name, Ayleen Murphy, St Aloysius School, July 1948. And my mum and dad have done some maths and figured out this means Aunty Ayleen would have been 14 when she received this. The time of year that it is, the reference to St Aloysius School and the age she would have been, lead us to conclude that this was a leaving school present, because that was the age you left school in 1948. So again, quite apart from the publication and Father O'Grady's work, a little bit of personal history really does add interest to these books that end up on the bench. Before I could tackle any of the other problems, I had to remove the 81-year-old staples from this booklet. These had understandably rusted, which had stained the card cover inside and out, and one was already broken, and the other one broke while I was doing this extraction, so it was a bit fiddly really. I'll always remember my mentor telling me that just as plumbers are honour bound to remove any lead that they come across in the course of their work, likewise we bookbinders are honour bound to remove any steel that we see. So it was time for the 81-year-old staples to go. With the pages detached, I could focus on repairing the cover. One of the staples had also torn through the card partially and enlarged the holes, which would make it no good for sewing. So I used calico. This is a kind of starchy material, very common in book repair, to reinforce the cover and give me something a bit more solid to sew onto. I used bookbinder's PVA to secure that into place. You can see here the bright white strip of calico I took this length from, which I decided to dye so it blended in with the colour of the card, because I thought it'd be too stark a contrast when you open the booklet and see that bright white strip of calico. That'd be quite distracting, so I wanted to blend it in and make it a bit more appealing that way. It also helps to hide the rust staining on the inside as well, so that was a bonus. I set that aside to dry, and then I could get on with the most time-consuming problem that I had to face, the mould staining on the title page. While it had long since dried out, it wasn't actively mouldering. The old mould had left very noticeable dark grey discoloration on that title page. It was really unsightly. To that end, I'm here using a specialist conservation pad. This contains a compound which is non-abrasive, and when you work it over the surface of mould-stained paper like this, the compound effectively sticks to the staining, and then you can brush the compound away, leaving the original paper behind. Now, honestly, it is pretty mind-numbing, rolling this around in tiny circles for 45 minutes, and it's really hard to tell how well it's working because the change is so incremental. But after 3/4 of an hour, I decided that was as good as it was going to get without shipping this thing off to the British Library or something to get real specialist conservation treatment done. Then it was time to start reassembling. I settled on a 5-hole pamphlet stitch to hold the booklet together. The staples provided 4 of the holes, although as I say they were larger than needed to be, so I added the 5th hole, the middle hole, with my awl, and that takes some doing even with a pointy tool like an awl. Nearly all book sewing is done with linen thread, often waxed. You can buy it pre-waxed, but I do enjoy waxing my own with a block of pure, unbleached beeswax. Amongst other benefits, it stops the thread from fraying or catching on anything as you're doing the sewing. I had kept the new middle sewing station, the middle hole, deliberately small so it would really hold that thread tightly and wouldn't be intrusive to look at when the middle of the booklet is open, but it did make sewing a little more of a fiddle, actually getting the needle through that hole. Just a simple knot to finish, trim the ends, and now it's a perfectly working booklet again. Having seen how well that dyed calico blended in with the card on the inside, I revised my original plan to use a strip of book cloth on the outside to reinforce that slightly torn spine and hide the rust stains on the outside again. I cut and dyed a wider piece of calico, dyed it in the same way, and using Bookbinder's PVA again, attached that to the outside of the card cover. It also hides the visible sewing on the outside, so this one's really accomplishing 3 goals in one. Calico is actually quite stretchy when it's got adhesive on it, so I worked it over the cover rather slowly to keep the stretch even and keep it in a straight line. Looking back at this, I was probably overcautious, but I knew I'd only get one chance at this, so wanted to take the time to make sure it was right. With the booklet itself complete, I made a portfolio style case with a ribbon closure and used heated brass type and a little Greek cross brass tool you can see on the bench there to apply the title and the cross design in silver. I typically make a grey board jig like this to ensure the correct placement and spacing. As you can hear, I was rather satisfied with the result. A quick tidy up with some tape to pick up stray bits of foil, and it's done. I was definitely in 2 minds about whether to put a title on this folder, this case, or not. Largely because setting brass type by hand in this holder is very tricky work and very time consuming. But then I realised that it actually served a practical purpose as well, because if I didn't indicate which was the front and which was the top, there was a chance that you could pick this up upside down and the booklet inside could slide out, which obviously isn't what I'm going for. I'm trying to protect it. So putting this on means obviously when you pick it up you know which way is up and the booklet's not going to slide out. It did take me some time to figure out how I was going to achieve protecting the booklet inside and also making a case, a presentation that was really worthy of what was inside, and I think I've done that in this case. So I've used a very nicely textured book cloth here. It takes the tooling very well, and the design of it I think also works very well. It's very simple. It doesn't need to be complicated to have a good effect. So obviously the contrast between the maroon of the book cloth and the blue of the ribbon is a nice contrast. And it's always nice to open something with a ribbon. It always feels like opening a present, I think. So yeah, it does. Inside is the whole point of the project, and it has to be said the 2 big victories in this process have been the stain removal from the title page, removing that mould staining. As you can see from the before and after pictures, it's a noticeable difference, it's a noticeable improvement, so I'm very happy about that. But the most satisfying thing for me personally has been dyeing these reinforcing linen strips both inside and outside this card cover, blending them in better than I thought it would with the card cover, Adding to the satisfaction for me is the fact that this was done with English breakfast tea, because this the lady that owned this, my Aunty Ayleen, an English lady who moved to the United States way back in the 60s, before international travel was really as commonplace as it is now. And I know, because having done this, my family have been reminiscing, and they told me that the first time my grandmother went out to visit her sister, my Aunty Ayleen, my grandmother was told, as a matter of some urgency, to bring a tin of Quality Street and as many tea bags as she could fit into the carry-on luggage. So having done this with English breakfast tea, I don't know, it just adds something to the family story, I think, or fits in well with it. And doing this whole thing has really got me thinking about these kinds of little booklets. They were so commonplace back in the day, but they were never meant to be preserved or become heirlooms in any way. But of course it's only natural that they did. It's an instinct in us to preserve these family items. But because it's not a book, because it doesn't sit on the shelf very well, it's a small, fragile thing. To preserve it, we throw them in shoeboxes and they end up in the back of wardrobes somewhere with all the broken rosary beads that I know you have, because I have them too. But you can't bring yourself to dispose of them in any way because of who gave them to you. So I can't help with the rosary beads, unfortunately. But I can help if there are these little devotional booklets languishing in a box, in a drawer somewhere, and you'd like to bring them out. They can go on the shelf now with cases like this. You can present them to loved ones, other family members who have those shared memories, just like we're doing here. It's a very nice thing to return this to my Aunty Ayleen's son. It's going to mean more to him than it would it staying here. It's only right that it gets returned to him. So if there's something like that, if this has sparked a memory, or you think you remember vaguely having something like this in a box, in a drawer, wherever, there is something that can be done to make a worthwhile presentation and to protect that slice of your family history. So get in touch. Be more than happy to consult with you about how we can go about this, and make something that's really going to be worthy for your family as well. So please do that. Like, share and subscribe, and do all the other things. Or if you think someone else in the family has that box full of stuff, maybe they need to take a look at this and see what we can do. Please do share it around. I'm trying to grow this YouTube channel. But until the next time, here endeth the blog. Go in peace.